tossed unceremoniously to earth, the valiant prince rolled the Katamari entrusted to him by the king, rolling up more things than you can count. Vaulting boxes, pencils, erasers,
postcards, ramen, robots, cows, sheep, this girl, that boy, moms and dads, bicycles, motorbikes, homes, buildings, rainbows, clouds, islands, rainbows, and dreams, hopes, dreams.
The prince rolled them all up, rolled and rolled until the Katamari was big enough to be lifted up to space to replace the shiny stars that were so grievously lost. And that, dear friends, was the plot and purpose of the fabulous game called
Katamari Damacy!
Yep, it's basically that. This is We Love Katamari, a sentiment I share wholeheartedly. This game is amazingly fun. This is the second PS2 Katamari game, and is the second game in the series altogether. And I think ultimately, this is the sort of game that other sequels truly aspire to be, because it hits all the notes a proper sequel should. Now the story to We Love Katamari is, there's this game called Katamari Damacy, it was popular, we need to make a sequel to it. You might be thinking that I'm making some joke about the games industry or something, but that is genuinely the plot of this game. More accurately, the king of all cosmos just wants to forget how he had a drunken bender and destroyed the entire night sky. After getting his son to fix it for him, suddenly a bunch of fans come up to him saying, "That was a lot of fun, let us do it again." And he just kind of shrugs, says no, and then they start praising how cool he was, saying, "That was awesome, you're amazing, let's do it again." And he's like, "Okay." Yeah, he's an easy one to butter up, I guess. Now, the whole core A-plot of this game is various fans will come up to you asking you to do various tasks and you have to complete them. However, like every other Katamari game in existence, there's something of a B-plot going on as well. As you clear levels, you'll be presented with cutscenes revealing the backstory of the King of All Cosmos and how he sort of came into his own from being a very tiny little prince himself who was basically dumped on by his father forever until he basically became the great king that we all know and love. There's romance, there's action, there's danger, there's suspense. It's basically got everything a good story needs. And of course, it being Katamari, there's also a fantastic environmental story being told in every single level. Because of course these environments are littered with objects, and these objects have always been placed in such ways that they sort of indicate a greater story that you ultimately end up interrupting because, well, you're the main character, it's your story that's the most important, but still, that's the thing about Katamari games is they've always had fantastic environmental storytelling, just based on item placement relative to other games. And the only other game series I can think of that did something similar to this were the Fallout games. They did something very similar, but environmental storytelling. It's amazing here, and you get not one, not two, but three plots. In fact, that whole third plot of environmental storytelling basically makes every level its own story. How awesome is that? Ridiculously, I know. Now, We Love Katamari plays basically exactly like Katamari Damacy. As a quick primer for those of you who don't know Katamari Damacy, and, you know, feel free to go watch my video on it already. Katamari Damacy is a game about rolling a sticky bumbleball looking thing. Wow, I am still really just old. But you roll your sticky bumbleball around the environments trying to pick up objects to make your ball as big as possible. And here comes the biggest issue most players will have with this game, and that is just sort of the learning curve of the game. Now again, if you've played Katamari Damacy, this won't be a problem, but if this is your first Katamari game, it's gonna have a bit of a learning curve. Because on a fundamental level, the game controls using both analog sticks to move your character. The best way to think of it is that behind your ball is a set of invisible hands, and these hands push it along depending on which direction is pushed on the control sticks. So if you push up on the left analog stick, your left hand would push the ball forward on its left side. Whereas if you push your right analog stick, then the right hand would push the ball forward on the right side. However, if you only push one of these sticks, you're basically going to rotate in place, so it really requires understanding how that works. Now, the nice thing about this dual analog stick movement is it affords a lot of nuance to the controls. Instead of simply having, forward, back, left, right, diagonals, and even more importantly, the range of movement that an analog stick affords you, you get basically twice as much just based on how the two analog sticks are working in conjunction with each other. Which means that while the initial control is a little bit off-putting for anyone who's got no experience with it, it ends up being a very, very easy to control, and you have a lot more control over your ball than any other game which would have, well, basically half the control at that point. Now that said, that doesn't mean the controls are perfect. Katamari's always sort of had an issue of performing a dash attack, which requires you to alternate pushing forward and back on both sticks. And while it's a lot easier to perform in this game than the previous one, it's still not necessarily the easiest move to pick up on. And another ability you need is to roll up walls. It's very simple, you just push towards the wall until your Katamari awkwardly sort of rolls up it. But because of the way the game handles its physics engine, half the time you'll roll up it, the other half the time it'll deem your ball as not being round enough, and it'll scatter 90% of the stuff you've collected. So unfortunately they didn't quite perfect that part of the controls. But if you can get past the fairly basic tutorial, you shouldn't have any problems whatsoever getting into this game. And really, that's the biggest hurdle any player's going to have with this, is really just picking up on the whole two analog sticks to move thing. Get past that, you're golden. Now, gameplay to Katamari Damacy was a very simple prospect. You were given your sticky ball, you were told you had X amount of time to roll up the ball as big as possible by picking up small bits of things, moving on to slightly bigger bits of things, and then eventually you're rolling down the street, picking up cars and people and buildings, just causing general chaos all over the world. It's fantastic. Well, this game has pretty much all of that, which is great. But they said, hey, this is a sequel. We gotta do this right. So not only do they have the make your ball as big as possible goal, that's still very much in here, but now brought to the forefront in arguably more importance than simply making your ball as big as possible was various new goals that sort of nuance this mechanic. I mean, in the first game, 99% of the levels were roll your ball as big as possible. Occasionally you'd get constellation missions which would have you rolling up X number of crabs or something, and that was a step in the right direction. This game takes that concept and blows it wide open. So now you've got fans who want you to roll up every flower in a garden, or fans who want you to roll up everything under the sea just to see what it's like to roll a Katamari underwater. You've got one that requires you to roll up a bunch of fireflies so he can read under the night sky. You have a race car driver which requests that you end up rolling on a racetrack, which means that you're not rolling the Katamari, but your car is. Or, if you're playing as my boy Kuro here, the Kuro cycle. And every single character has a different vehicle, which is amazing and just shows how much detail went into this game. But more importantly, your Katamari will constantly move forward. You have no control over that. You've got a mission where you have to try and roll up the sun. You've got a mission where you have to try and roll up Hansel and Gretel's arch nemesis, the evil witch's gingerbread house, so they can finally eat it without getting cooked. To really make you rethink how Katamari plays, there's even a level designed to make your Katamari as big as possible with as few objects as possible. You have an item budget, so you can only go after the really big ticket items. That's amazing. There's a level where instead of a Katamari, you're rolling up a sumo wrestler eating food to try and beat the Yokozuna. And on a great twist, there's even a level where you're trying to avoid getting rolled up by the king pushing his own Katamari. But you can get revenge on him for that. You have to create a Katamari of friends for someone who feels very, very lonely. I'm right there with you, buddy. But that's the power of Katamari. It's the power of the cosmic spirit engulfing you in friendship. Or something. The fact is, though, while every level in this game ultimately feels like it sort of features the same goal of make your Katamari as big as possible, that's no longer the focus necessarily of each level. Instead, now you have varied goals, which ultimately means that every level, even though it has the same core purpose, feels entirely different. And that is mind-blowingly amazing. And it's incredible how many different level types you get out of this. And they still have all the same features the previous game did, including finding a hidden present and a hidden cousin in every level. In fact, once you find all the cousins, there's a level devoted just to rolling up all the cousins. And you'll really hate those two jerks that dance around a tree because you can't get them. And hey, unlike the previous Katamari, as you can clearly see by the fact I'm not playing as the prince here, you can actually play as any of the cousins once you roll them up, and what is possibly an even cooler aspect about the Katamari cousins is the fact that once you roll them up and add them to your database, they retroactively enter every other level you've been in. So suddenly they're back in a level you've already cleared and they're interacting with the world in a different way, and of course because you can roll them up, suddenly you've got more stuff to make your ball even bigger, which means you want to re-explore areas you've already finished. And that's not even all the throwbacks and cameos in all the levels. The family from the first game, they're not just here to make requests, they're in every level. So if you're a fan of the original Katamari, which, I mean, that's the whole point of this game, is kind of appeasing fans, well, there's a lot of fan service here, but it's not the focus. The focus is still the excellent rolling up and the now very focused variants on that whole concept. But if you're here as a fan, there's just going to be a lot of things here that are just going to make you smile. And it's just ridiculous how much content is in this game because, of course, as an arcade-style game, once you beat the levels, you can go back and try and beat your score. You might unlock various versions of the same level, like instead of trying to make your ball as big as possible, your goal is to make it a certain size, but as fast as possible. Every level has a few different variations on it, which means even once you've finished it once, there's always a reason to come back. Seriously, this game is amazing like that. Now, that said, is this game perfect? Well, no. I've got a grand total of 2 problems with this game in terms of gameplay, not including the sort of learning curve for the main controls or anything, but first and foremost is the grand ultimate secret prize of the game, because once you've unlocked everything in the game, you unlock one extra level. This level's goal is to roll up 1 million roses. And you can roll up these roses by a factor of 1, or hold on to your hats because this is a game changer, 10. And your Katamari does not get any bigger, and there's only about 2,000 roses on the environment at any one time. And the thing is, while they'll respawn, and you don't have to do this in one sitting, it's still just a stupid amount of busy work for no real purpose. For the sake of perspective here, let's just do some quick math in my head here, and say you could gather 2,000 roses in a minute. Which, I mean, good luck with that, but after about an hour, you'd have about 1/10 of what you need in order to ultimately finish the mission, which means you would need 10 hours of straight rolling in order to make that happen. That is just dumb. And of course, that's with that huge concession of 2,000 per minute. Now, some players have written guides on how to automate this process, and for the sake of the argument, I decided to try this, but the best I could ever achieve was like 1,000 roses every 10 minutes, which, quick math will tell you, at that point you'd have to work 20 times longer, which is of course, assuming you don't dip at any point, 200 hours of work that ultimately unlocks basically nothing. So yes, as much as I love this game, it has a giant bonus secret level that is completely and utterly bullshit. Now my second problem about We Love Katamari is this, and simply this. It ends. Seriously, I love this game. I hate the fact that it ends, and like pretty much every Katamari game, it feels very, very short. I mean, ultimately, not including permutations of existing levels, there's only about 15 or so. And while later levels can take up to an hour, earlier ones, they take maybe 2 minutes. So you can get through this game really, really quick, and I have to appreciate that there are lots of permutations on existing levels, and I have to appreciate that it's very arcadey, and there's lots and lots and lots of stuff to collect. But ultimately, there's not a lot of levels, and if you're just interested in a once-through, you're gonna beat it very, very quickly. And seriously, instead of that rose level, they could have given you like any other level and it would have extended the game in not a stupid manner, so there's that too. But it's also a Katamari game, which means that there's going to be a level that makes you hate cows and bears and things of an exact specific size, and this game is no different. But this game takes everything Katamari Damacy did in terms of gameplay and refines it and expands it and experiments with it in a very delightful way. This is a very, very fun game, very uplifting to play. It's just addictive and great. The presentation to We Love Katamari is fantastic. I mean, it's basically Katamari Damacy again, which doesn't hurt my feelings. The human beings have a weird sort of boxy look to them, and the entire game has a sort of, not quite cel-shaded, but definitely a sort of comic booky, manga, cartoony look to it that definitely sells it for me. Everything's bright, it's colorful, it's got tons of personality, and well, it's just fantastic. And again, the way objects are placed in the world helps create a greater understanding of how this world works and helps to see kind of a greater story even though you're not part of it. That's amazing to me. The audio design is, well, again, it's basically Katamari Damacy, and like every other Katamari Damacy game after the first one, it likes to homage the first game a lot by reusing its soundtrack and remixing it. And this game's no different, but the songs it does remix definitely take on their own personality. I mean, case in point, you have one song that is literally the entire previous game's soundtrack barked by dogs. Yeah. But even though it's got 2 or 3 songs that homage the previous game, it's got plenty of songs that are completely unique to its own. Angel Rain, Baby Universe, Everlasting Love. It's got so many that are just unique to this game and would ultimately be homaged in later Katamari games because it was just that damn good. And of course, we can't forget the crazy sound effects this game has, because everything you pick up has a sound effect. And, well, picking up bugs might not be that interesting. Later on in the game, when you're picking up office buildings and cars and people and elephants and countries and planets, hearing the insane cacophony of screams and shouts and random sound effects, just brilliant. The soundtrack to this game is just a massive playlist of really good feel-good music, and when that's accompanied by the insanity of the sound effects, it's truly an experience. Now, if you want a copy of We Love Katamari on the PS2, it's about $15-20. And you know, that's a damn good price. I easily paid 3 times that when I first got my copy, and I don't regret it, because while Katamari Damacy might be the best singular dollar I've ever spent on a game, this just does everything that game does, but more and better, and really plays with its own ideas and concepts, and does it perfectly. Now, does that mean this is the best Katamari game? That's up for debate. I would say it would either be this one or Katamari Forever on the PS3. Both games designed to more or less appease fans and look back nostalgically on the series in their own ways. But neither of them really end up existing for the sake of pandering to fans. Even though, you know, that's kind of the plot of this game. It's more a celebration of what has happened, and what is going to happen, and how we're going to get there, because they're constantly changing, they're constantly evolving and learning, and that's just part of the beauty of Katamari. Sure, it might be a slice of just weird Japanese-ness that we probably shouldn't have gotten in North America, but ultimately, I'm very, very glad we did, because We Love Katamari is easily one of my favorite PS2 games. It's certainly been one of the ones I've sunk the most time into. If you have any interest in weird games, Japanese games, things that are very, very PS2 in the sense that there's lots of obscure things that are just amazing that no one's ever heard of, this one's definitely down your alley. It's not that expensive and it's totally worth it. That said, it is definitely a sequel, so if you want the full story, well, you might want to get the first one, but this one blows it out of the water by a country mile. And ultimately, We Love Katamari is not just a game, it's an experience. It is a collection of thoughts and ideas and words and worlds and spirits and seasons and planets all coming together in one giant sticky ball of awesome that will ultimately engulf the sun and all the universe. And you know what? I wouldn't have it any other way.
Courageous, Zokuhenante, Aluta Amona, Suzukinante Mutamarina, Imawi Kiro, Taisetsunano, Imananda Mono.